get up. And on the way up, we're going to bite a kneecap off, all right? And we're going to stand up, and then it's going to take 2 more shots to knock us down, all right? And on the way up, we're going to take your other kneecap, and we're going to get up, and then it's going to take 3 shots to get us down.
What's up, Kneecaps Nation? Off we go here on another episode of Kneecaps for Breakfast. Vince Progar, that's me. Happy to be joined alongside my longtime partner in crime, Phil Byrne. And Phil, since the 2024 NFL season is officially in the rearview mirror now with the completion of Super Bowl 59, I would like to hereby dub this the official start of Season 2 of Kneecaps for Breakfast. Welcome aboard.
The season premiere, usually it's pretty flashy. You got some big time guests, a lot of content. Well, we'll get into that in the offseason.
Yeah.
We got a game to recap that did not involve the Detroit Lions.
No.
And that's kind of how we're going to kick off season 2, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. So the Super Bowl, I think it's safe to say, caught a lot of people outside from the 53 players on the Eagles roster and the about dozen people on the coaching staff. Aside from those guys, I think everybody was caught off guard by the end result of it. It was really never a game. I don't think Kansas City had more than 1 first down and about 25 total yards through 1 half a play. And by the time Kendrick Lamar took the stage at halftime, that game was long a thing of the past at that point. So by far one of the least start to finish entertaining games, I guess, if you're into the whole back and forth close game kind of thing. But Phil, what did you learn about the Philadelphia Eagles after the 40-22 beatdown of the Kansas City Chiefs, denying them of a three-peat, as it were? And I got news for you. That game didn't look nearly as close as that final score indicated.
Yeah, score was deceiving. Howie Roseman, absolute, got to tip your cap to the way that he constructed this roster by getting some veterans like A.J. Brown and Saquon Barkley, either in trade or free agency. You go get a guy like Jalen Hurts in the second round. This team's foundation, though, was set, several years ago. Guys like Johnson and Mauluda, and, I know they don't have, Jason Kelsey on this team. Strong on both sides of the line of scrimmage. And to me, that game was decided by the Eagles' defensive line. They did not blitz once. No blitzes on, I think, who everyone is going to say, even regardless of that game last night, the best quarterback in the NFL in kind of this modern era. It is the Mahomes era, if you will. Not a single blitz. And they had stellar athleticism. They absolutely worked the Chiefs' offensive line and all those SEC guys from Alabama and Georgia. And, places like Iowa and Toledo on the backside in that secondary. They've actually just knocked it out of the park. So credit to Howie Roseman. Nick Sirianni, I think, did a masterful job of really getting the troops together. And, shame on us and everyone else, the so-called experts, if you will, because I don't think at any point in this season anyone defiantly said that the Philadelphia Eagles are the best team in the NFL. They were, when all was said and done. They never let go, coming out of that bye week. And we're just all fools for not recognizing it, I guess, earlier.
Yeah, and I don't think it came down to a matter of the Philadelphia Eagles were the better team on the night of February 9th, 2025. I think what we learned, and good call out on Howie Roseman, he put on a masterclass in roster construction from top to bottom, and I think it put on display for all the world to see that roster of 53 men was probably the strongest unit out of any other one in the NFL. I think it just took a little while for everybody to pick up on it. And I think we were maybe a little bit biased for what was going on right under our own noses.
Yeah.
Obviously, with the Kansas City Chiefs, with all the attention and sex appeal that they exposed to the world. But I think the whole time, I think it was the Eagles that had the best overall team all along.
Yeah. And again, they have been really, really good, the past few years. Yes, they had some ups and downs. But they were just in this game a couple years ago. Saquon Barkley gave them the edge offensively that they needed. You do feel good for a guy like Jalen Hurts, who of course got benched at Bama for Tua. He transferred to Oklahoma, was not a first round pick. He was a second round pick. They had Carson Wentz on the team when they drafted him. But getting a guy like Saquon Barkley and getting way more of a run element mixed in to where you didn't have to go put this game on Jalen Hurts' shoulder to go win it, really, really did an awesome job. And I think Jalen Hurts had these last two games, two of his best games that he's had, as a pro. So, I don't think anyone's going to go out and still call Jalen Hurts a top 3 quarterback in the NFL. But you know what? After last night, who gives a crap? It doesn't matter. They won the Super Bowl. He played awesome. This team played awesome. And, certainly a lot of us, including both of us that picked the Chiefs, I think we're just kind of almost blinded by the perceived excellence of Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, and just thinking that they were just going to maybe not steamroll the Eagles, but we've just seen it before, and we thought it was going to play out again, and it was nothing further from the truth.
Yeah, and we talked all season long as it pertained to the Lions about complementary football, and we saw it on full display. We saw the Eagles defense pressuring Mahomes, keeping him under duress and running for his life the entire night, throwing poorly timed interceptions. And the defense did their job. Now you're turning it over to the Eagles offense, which you didn't really see the best night out of Saquon Barkley, 25 carries for 57 yards with a little over 2 yards a carry. That's nothing impressive in any type of game, much less the Super Bowl. But what it does is it sets up the Eagles offense on short fields, and now you're getting Jalen Hurts into throwing high percentage passes, good quality passes. It's almost like in basketball where you take that extra pass, you pass up the good shot for a great shot. Jalen Hurts was taking great shots the entire night, and he did everything that he absolutely needed to. He didn't do anything more. He did exactly what he needed to, and that was more than enough. 220 some odd yards passing. I think he only had 4 incomplete passes the whole night. And boom, it's the good defense was setting up the offense, putting them in good shape on the field, and they cashed in every time. And before you know it, just like we said before halftime, you're looking at a multi-score deficit, and Kansas City had no answer. And I think you had a Xavier Worthy making a couple of plays in the second half, but by that point, the game was already well in hand, and I think the defense was already starting to let their foot off the gas a little bit because the game wasn't in doubt any longer. And I think if the game were maybe just a hair closer, I'm not sure Kansas City would have even mustered what they were able to on offense as it pertains to what actually popped up in the stat sheet.
Yeah, and just to kind of tie it home to our Lions, I think a lot of people have played the, what if game. We got handed by the Commanders. So, I mean, just to even throw this out there as a hypothetical is just,
no,
February radio.
We wouldn't have made it. We wouldn't have made it past the Eagles.
There's no way. They were such a complete team, and they have been throughout the entirety of the playoffs. You thought we got, steamrolled by the Commanders. Well, we would have had a whole nother thing coming in the championship game. So think about how heartbreaking that would have been too, to have that game at home to get us in the Super Bowl. So I'm not saying I feel better about it this way, but what I do feel about is that the blueprint that we saw with the Eagles, I think a lot of the Lions roster construction in terms of how they want to play is very similar in terms of some of the guys, the way we've drafted and things like that. You got to feel good that the NFL does not have a current monopoly, a monarchy, a dynasty in place with the Kansas City Chiefs that, yes, next season's a whole nother story, but they gave you a little bit of blueprint on how to attack Patrick Mahomes, how to play, and specifically, you got to run the ball and you got to take the ball out of his hands and make him uncomfortable. They did it to perfection last night.
And take a look at how some of these giants, as it were, no pun intended, were able to be slayed over time. Brady on a couple of different occasions against the Giants, great front four. When he was with the Bucks, and they played Mahomes. What was it?
Mm-hmm.
Great front four. What did we
Mm-hmm.
see the other night? Great front four. It's almost like that is the blueprint to getting the best of some of these behemoths at quarterback, whether it be Mahomes or whether it be Brady or whether it be the next guy that rises up and it seems to be in the Super Bowl year after year. I mean, it's true in a big way that defense does win championships. So what I want to know from you, Phil, is we'll obviously go deeper into this as it comes time for draft coverage and once free agency officially opens up and this and that. But what I want to know from you is how does that affect what the Lions need to do moving forward compared to what we know their game plan to be up until now?
So, even without Ben Johnson's play calling and things like that, I think we can all agree that maybe the offensive line is kind of the one area that you look on the offense to try to beef up a little bit. I feel pretty good about everywhere else on the offense. That defense, I think having Zadarius Smith alongside Aiden Hutchinson will help. Zadarius Smith, I'm sure when he has Aiden on the other side, is going to be a much more impactful player. I think without question, and I know it's not this team's draft philosophy in terms of drafting for need, but I think it's going to have a good blend of like where I've seen some of these mock drafts early on, and we're not going to get into the mock drafts tonight, so I'm not going to give any names or anything like that. But 100% the defensive line, you would think that's got to be where they want to go with that first round pick. Again, we're picking at 28. We're not at 29 or 30 or anything like that. So we have a little bit of a better pick than we have had like last year. But I think that's where this draft is going to be deep. I think there's going to be a guy that they can get. I don't really want to get into the Myles Garrett conversation or the Max Crosby conversation here tonight. That's certainly an avenue, but in order to make that work, just realize that's potentially Brian Branch, that's Kirby Joseph. These are some of the guys that we love on this team that all of a sudden you don't have the financial capability to bring them back. So are you willing to give that up to go in and get that other premier rush? So I think it's going to be from the financial sense. You go get the absolute stud in the first round that you can, and you plug him in there. And again, I think Hutch, if he's healthy, if he's coming back in the next year, you're going to get some instant results, I think, for whoever you draft. I think that's kind of the impact sometimes these defensive ends in the tail end of the first round can bring, even if they're not a top 5 pick or anything. So I think we have some things to play with. But again, going back to what you were just talking about a couple of minutes ago, it's that front four. And I think we all love Lee McNeil. DJ Reader's getting a little old in the tooth as well. So either D end or D tackle. That's got to be addressed this offseason. We have to get better there. We do have some impending, free agents. Again, we'll kind of break down the Lions roster and offseason stuff like that a little bit more in depth beginning next week. But that's where you got to think we're going to be looking to help booster this.
100%. Now, I am going to go against what you said, though, because I do believe that it is worth mentioning because since we last spoke, Myles Garrett did formally request a trade. Whether he's granted that by his own team remains to be seen. But, Phil, I want to know from you, what do you think it would take to have the Browns not completely hang up the phone on Brad Holmes? What would something like that require in your mind?
It would probably still be 2 first-round picks, I think, or a first and 2 seconds or something like that. Again, you got to think about where the Lions, if they were to go get Myles Garrett, potentially winning a Super Bowl, where they would be picking. So basically, whatever first-round pick we are getting is essentially a high second-round pick, right? This is a draft, though. As we're getting into it, where the Lions are picking is where you want to be in the first round. There's not this huge, you really don't want to be in the top 10 in this draft. There are some very, very nice players that you can get, but I think anyone picking in the top 3 really doesn't want those picks. So Cleveland is probably trying to get someone to bite that is in kind of the range of where the Lions are at. So that's what it's going to take. More importantly, though, he's also going to want the new deal. And I think that's where we'll have to see what the Lions kind of stand. Maybe there's a way where you can get a guy under contract, like a Kirby Joseph, um, to where it gives you a little bit more flexibility, you know. But you know, Hutch needs a new deal too. So you can't have all the shiny toys. There is a salary cap. This is not baseball. You are not the Mets. You're not the Yankees. So there are some ramifications that you have to you know, keep in mind here.
I think the biggest thing is going to gain some level of clarity as to how much of a sticking point that new deal for Miles Garrett would be. It's a matter of, hey, do you want to get two bites at the apple on a winning team that can contend for something?
Yeah.
Or do you want to possibly be stuck in a situation where after our little window closes, then you're right back to square one like you were with Cleveland and being more of a floundering franchise at the tail end of it? So you kind of have to figure out what's going on in his mind. I think personally, if the asking price is only going to be two firsts or maybe a first and a high second day pick or something like that, I think you make that deal all day long because, like we said, you are talking essentially second round picks at this point. You're not going to be getting anything probably above 20 for the next couple of years, ideally. And if you are, that means something's wrong and you're starting
Yeah.
to move in the opposite direction. So I don't know how it's going to shake out. I don't even know if he has any interest in coming to the Lions. I don't know
No,
if
I'm sure he
just
does.
maybe he just
Yeah, like
wants
you
to
would think.
play for the Eagles. I know I'm hearing the Eagles a lot. I'm hearing the Bears a little bit. I'm not hearing in NFL news pundit circles as much about the Lions as I would have hoped. So I don't really know what to make of that, but I
Yeah.
don't want them to take the overly cautious route of, oh, hey, we need to worry about our draft capital because I
So
think you almost need to have that Rams FDM picks mindset at this point and understand that once this thing does end, because it's going to at some point, you just need to understand that once they hit the ground floor, it's going to be a hard hit, but at least you know you will have given everything you had to try and get to that Super Bowl.
now you did bring up the Rams, and obviously that is where our general manager came from. They did have that mentality, but you know, you want to talk about another team that struck gold. They basically got a pass rush that I think was probably top five in the NFL, based around a late first round pick in Jared Verse. You know, I think we both liked him going through and kind of breaking down where the draft was. We would have loved for him to, you know, be there for the Lions pick. But that is also, you know, a way to do it. I think there's a lot of different ways you can look into it. I think the biggest thing that the way this is constructed, though, is you have to keep in mind who we have to bring back on these contracts. So, you know, what positions do you think you can go ahead and find a guy in the third and fourth round and you've got the heir apparent to someone if you're going to lose? Um, the Lions roster next to the Eagles and a couple of other teams, again, probably one of the most stacked in the NFL. I think we love what we've seen there. But, you know, there's a reason, you know, even without the injuries that, you know, we lost to Washington. So there's a lot to be done. We have a long offseason to talk about it. Going back to what we were talking about with the Super Bowl, though, the blueprint was there. The Eagles got it done with defense. And I think we are both in unison here. The path forward for this team is going to be to bolster this defensive line.
Where have I heard that before? Oh, yeah, it's almost like we talked about that all this past offseason, and I feel like we weren't fully listened to on that. Maybe I'm mistaken. I know injuries had somewhat of a thing, but it's almost like, hey, and we'll again re-adjudicate the roster moves later this offseason, but like,
Yeah.
hey, what a great idea. Let's put injury-prone Marcus Davenport right across from Hutchinson. What could possibly go wrong?
What could go wrong? Yeah. So, yeah, I would expect Davenport not to be back. He was on a 1 year deal. So either way, whether it is Zadarius Smith or someone else, we probably are going to be looking at a new starting defensive end
They
opposite
sure as
Hutch to
heck
start the
better.
season.
Yep,
Yep.
but again, we'll get to all that, but what are the implications as far as the Chiefs are concerned? What do you think their runway looks like for the Super Bowl reign of terror that they've been on up until now. You think next year's the year they start another little streak, or do you think that the Kansas City Chiefs' days of dominance are more or less numbered?
Well, I think the interesting thing for them is I think the idea that Mahomes is going to put on a Superman cape and they're just going to waltz into being the top seed in the AFC, that is over. That is a thing of the past. I don't think they're going to be able to do that anymore. You got to look at the Bills and the Ravens, these two teams that have been knocking on the door and haven't been able to get through. They're probably going to be extremely aggressive, maybe in Miles Garrett, conversations or a Max Crosby conversation or something like that. But with the Chiefs, clearly their offensive line and trying to get, a guy who's a little bit more comfortable playing at guard, and Joe Tooney moved out to the outside at left tackle. It didn't work. The Eagles exposed it. So, you know, it's great that you have Patrick Mahomes. Who knows what's going to happen with Travis Kelsey? They need to get a left tackle. And that is far easier said than done. Next to the quarterback, that is probably the most expensive position. So again, these don't hit the open market in free agency if they're worth a damn. So now they got to look at pick 31 and see who is the best left tackle that we can possibly get. I think the other thing that they're getting is if you're picking high in the second round and you want an offensive tackle, the Chiefs have to go get one. So they can go ahead and try to go jump them up in the draft and things like that. But this division that they're in, I think we saw what a good division can do to, fuel the Lions, the Vikings, the Packers into these really stellar seasons. It is absolutely no cakewalk. I think with the exception of the Raiders, they still, have to build some things there. I think Jim Harbaugh and the Chargers, though, Sean Payton, the Broncos, they have some really, really special things that are there. They have young quarterbacks. They have some pretty intriguing pieces, I think, on defense, on both sides of the ball. So, listen, I know Kansas City will still be the odds on favorite to win the division and probably even, quite frankly, win the Super Bowl from Vegas standpoint. But I think those two other teams are coming for them next year. I really do. And I think they're going to make it almost a fight to the finish, in the AFC West.
It does sound like Andy Reid does plan on coming back for another
Yeah.
year, so it does not sound like we're going to get the double retirement that we maybe thought was a possibility between Andy Reid and Travis Kelsey. I'm not hearing any indications that either one plans to ride off into the sunset, so we'll have to keep tabs on that. But it just kind of amazed me, Phil, going back to the way we saw the defense perform for the Eagles,
Yeah.
how it was almost like there was no fight in the Chiefs once things started getting a little bit tough. I hate using the word quit because I don't want to
Yeah.
imply that. I mean, they're all a bunch of self-respecting adults, all jokes and NFL memes aside. I mean, you still have a lot of guys with fierce competitive spirit on the other side, but there just was no evidence that there was going to be a counterpunch once things started to snowball for the Chiefs.
Yeah, there were a couple times when you would see Chris Jones and some of the guys on defense just kind of look in amazement that Mahomes was clearly rattled. He could not complete a pass. Um, you know, elephant in the room here. I think Isaiah Pacheco is a pretty interesting offensive weapon. Kareem Hunt, I think he's over 30 now. Can we just be real with the Chiefs? Like they really don't have much of a run game. Yeah, they can go punch it in, from about 10 yards out, but I don't think it's threatening anyone. So
And
I
they
think
did
that's
try it with like Clyde
yeah,
Edwards-Helaire a couple years ago, and that didn't work. He's no longer with the
no,
team. But I think it kind of boils down to what you were hinting at with the offensive line, Phil, is I think that
yeah,
the O-line up to this point was built more or less to protect Patrick Mahomes. I'm not
yeah.
sure that opening up holes in the run game was ever really a strength of theirs. So that may have to come down to as they start to fill in these different pieces on the offensive line and move guys out and bring guys in. You almost bring guys that are better run protectors than pass protectors, or at the very minimum, more like a hybrid offensive lineman.
Yeah. No, I can definitely see that. But yeah, no, I think I left that game obviously impressed with the Eagles and what they were capable of doing. But if I'm a Chiefs fan, again, I'm very thankful for this time that, we've been able to see the Chiefs and get the wins and the Super Bowls in what they've got. Patrick Mahomes now 3-2, in Super Bowls. But there are more questions than answers with the Chiefs
Yeah.
right now. And again, I know Vegas is probably going to have them as the favorite to return. That is terrible odds, and I do not like that bet if I'm sitting here one day after the Super Bowl based on what I just saw.
No, there's some work to be done for sure. Now, Phil, you've watched more than your fair share of Super Bowls over the years. Just from a top to bottom
Yeah.
production standpoint, what were your thoughts of what Super Bowl 59 looked like, from the pregame to the pageantry to the halftime to the commercials, all of it? Where does this stack up in the Phil Byrne roster of Super Bowls?
Um, can we talk about the score bug? Is this
Yeah,
is this our
while we're
platform to
at it.
talk about the score
Yeah,
bug?
for sure, for sure.
I saw a screenshot of the last Super Bowl that Fox did with the score bug that they introduced, and this kind of seems to be the thing that the networks, when they get the Super Bowl, they're going to go launch a new score bug or
Yep, I
new
picked up on that a
animations or
handful of years
graphics.
ago. So that's
Yeah.
what we're stuck with until they host the Super Bowl the next time.
What was that crap? Um, I get trying to make it um as dumbed down as possible, I guess, right? But I would have preferred to have like a team logo in there maybe instead of PHI and KC
I mean, they
in
used
just
to have that
in
years
50
ago.
size font, like um it seemed to be wildly unpopular online from the reaction, but I mean that's just kind of everyone's take on things. Oh, these commercials suck. Oh, this halftime show sucks. Oh, this scoreboard sucks. Oh my god, my salsa sucks. You know what I mean? Like I just don't think like Super Bowls are at a point where anyone's just like, oh, that's the coolest thing I've ever seen, because we've all experienced things, and obviously we cherish some of the moments that we've had over the years more than probably something that we're witnessing right now
Yeah, it's a
in the
lot of
year
been there, done
2025.
that.
Exactly. Um, I'm gonna be glad for another network to get the game next year. Um, I think Kevin Burkhardt is very, very good. And I know Tom Brady is the name, and they're paying him just an absolute ransom to be calling these games. If it was Fox, I wanted Greg Olson on that game. I think he is miles ahead of Tom Brady in terms of breaking down a game. I think there's the catch 22 now with Brady too, being part of the Raiders ownership, that he can't get into the meetings. He can't get the access that some of our other guys can do. And then I just look at maybe not so much CBS because I think Romo can get on my nerves a little bit, but the product that ESPN, ABC, or NBC has with those teams, they have the chemistry, they have the years, they have the reps, and I think they're way more enjoyable to listen to, with Buck and Aikman, and then obviously Tirico and Collinsworth, and those are the teams that I want to listen to, and it just felt very Fox being Fox, you know and this is the greatest thing ever. And it is what it is. It is a spectacle. If people are going to watch one game a year, it's going to be that game. Since Fox has our games as Lions fans, I just hope there are some slight tweaks. If that's the score bug that we have to live with during our Lions broadcast for the next couple of years, there are some tweaks, because I just wasn't a fan of it. For what was on display last night. Vince,
What,
what'd you
the
think?
little blue DET isn't going to turn the
Jet.
I
Yeah,
mean, I can't think of a situation where there really have been any wholesale modifications to the score bug since it was rolled out at the Super Bowl. So if I had to put money on it, I would say that's what we are stuck with moving forward. Now, I guess if there's any consolation to that, it's the fact that, hey, we've been on national TV more often, so maybe we won't be on Fox
that's a good point.
every week after week after week like we were during, say, the Quinn Trisha years or the early
Yeah,
Campbell part of the regime, but yeah, not great for Fox. At what point do you bring in somebody other than Terry Bradshaw to do the awards presentations? I mean, like how little of a man does Kurt Menefee feel like? Like, hey, I'm the host here. Why am I getting passed over for some bumbling has been from Louisiana?
Well, quite frankly, I think Michael Strahan's like broadcasting profile enough, doing all the
Good Morning
daytime
America,
talks.
and
I kind of figured he would have been the guy to do it and not Bradshaw, but
yeah,
that's what Fox wanted to do. So
I guess. But I mean, I don't know.
yeah, I
I
just
guess
wasn't a fan.
yeah, and maybe I'm just turning into one of those boomers that you mentioned how this
Hey, we're
sucks and that
millennials, Vince. Get it
sucks
right.
and da 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 da
You
da
know.
da 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 da. Da. I mean, I don't associate much with those millennials. I don't have much in common with them in the first place. But like, for instance, I couldn't name two Kendrick Lamar songs. Wasn't half bad. I mean, I'd rather have him than a lot of those teeny bopper pop stars or something like that that they've had in recent years. So I'm not going to
Yeah.
complain about that from a optic standpoint. I just didn't understand the performance because I don't know the music. So that worked against me. I think the commercials stopped being funny eons ago. There was one commercial over the course of the entire night that resonated with me, and that was the one with the guys in the Bud Light and the cul-de-sac party. I mean, that was the one that really spoke to me out of all of them. But besides that, it was kind of like, okay, whatever. I don't really care. And then when the game stopped being entertaining after about the first half a quarter, it was just kind of like, okay, is it time for college basketball? I mean, it's kind of sad, but like there was just nothing that kept my attention once the game started getting out of hand. It wasn't the commercials. It wasn't the
No.
halftime show. Again, I agree with you. Kevin Burkhardt's a solid
Yeah.
play-by-play guy. Tom Brady doesn't do it for me,
No.
and the sideline reporters don't bring anything of value to the operation.
No.
And there was just nothing to keep my attention.
No, Tom Rinaldi was great on College Game Day, when
Yeah.
he would do his pieces and things like that. But it doesn't seem like it's necessarily his role. And I don't know. To me, it just seems like Fox just has this inorbitant, planetary budget, and they'll just be willing to spend whatever just to spend. But it
Which is
doesn't
funny
mean
because you
it's
think with
good,
Rupert
you
Murdoch
know.
being on his eighth wife by now that he's paying a pretty penny in alimony and all this. So makes you wonder.
Yeah. But yeah, it is what it is. It's going to be one of those things. I think this was the Super Bowl that I probably spent the most time on my phone, just kind of
Yeah,
looking for
that's a good
something
way to put
else.
it.
This was very reminiscent to me, at least from the game standpoint, of that Seahawks Broncos game about 10 years
Ish.
ago or 11 years. Yeah, that was pretty much a snooze fest as well. Broncos didn't put up much of a fight in that game. Yeah. So, hey, we're moving on to bigger and better things. Super Bowl will be in San Francisco next year. Not sure off the top of my head what network gets it.
NBC.
But you know what? It won't be known as Super Bowl LIX. So we got our licks in,
Well,
and
it could be if you pronounce the L and the X together, because L and the X together is kind of like licks in the first place. So maybe that could be the first
uh,
Super Bowl where the pronunciation is the same in back-to-back years.
oh, well, we have that to look forward to.
Yeah. But like it goes beyond that though, Phil. Like maybe it's because I'm too close to it with the Lions flaming
Right.
out in my mind and everybody's mind a little earlier than they should have. But like I couldn't even get into the lead up. Like you have every pregame show and sports talk show and debate show live down in New Orleans, and I didn't care to watch any of that stuff. I didn't care what any talking heads had to say about the game in the days or hours leading up. I just
You
didn't
know,
care.
you know what I would have liked to see? How was this game from a rating standpoint viewed in Buffalo? Because with the way the Chiefs did not come to play and got absolutely manhandled, if we would have had a Bills Eagles Super Bowl, all of a sudden I'm way more interested into it.
Sure.
And that is a city that has been heartbroken time and time again. So again, when they couldn't get over the hump, you know, so That's
And
my
selfishly,
kind of
since
take on
misery
everything.
likes company, it was fine with the fact that the Buffalo Bills lost that game to the Chiefs because at least we know that there's another fan base that's hurting almost as much as ours is. So from that petty standpoint, I was okay with the fact that the Bills
Yeah,
lost. But
our
yeah,
Great Lakes
maybe
brethren.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. And maybe from that standpoint, maybe there were fewer Bills fans tuning in just because they're like, for what? So we can either A, watch Mahomes do what he always does and benefit from the officials and this and that, or the Eagles win. Either way, we're still sitting at home without a seat after the music stopped.
yeah.
So
The day the music stopped, or the day that the tables stood still. So no
I
one was
thought you were
jumping
going to
through
say the
tables in
music
Buffalo.
died, and yeah, that's a whole different. That's a
No,
whole
no, no, no. I mean, I like Kendrick Lamar. I knew his music and stuff like that. So I just think that, like my dad has clearly never listened to any of it. He doesn't have rap on there. But like again,
I think Randy and I have more similar music taste than you would think.
but like if they brought AC/DC out or something, some classic rock thing, you know, uh, you're now looking at a younger generation that'd be like, hey, who are these guys? Why are they older than Grandpa?
Yeah, yeah.
So there
Well, it
you go.
reminds me of the Detroit Super Bowl when they had the Rolling Stones, and half the people didn't know who they were. But hey, I did, and that's all that matters. As long as I'm
Hey.
satisfied, that's all that matters.
So wait, you can get some satisfaction oh, that's a Rolling Stone song. There we
Oh
go.
yeah,
Okay.
oh yeah. We just lost half our audience. Uh, so Phil, that officially puts a bow on the 2024 NFL season. We will break
Yeah.
things down as it pertains to the Lions a little bit more than this, but
Yeah.
it's all over and done with. Final thoughts before we officially turn the page.
It was heartbreaking. I don't think there's any way getting around it. Like this isn't what we wanted to see. Even kind of having the stank of the Chiefs in the Super Bowl again, but not facing us. No one was really happy with it. I think most Lions fans probably do not like the Eagles. We've had our battles over the years. They've had our number, for a long time. Um, I think you just have to really wonder if Aiden Hutchinson and Lee McNeil were healthy, would we have been looking at a different outcome? Just those two guys. Everyone else could still remain hurt. I think just having a little bit more on the defensive line where you're not going on guys that, bounced around three teams in the preseason. And then all of a sudden they were asked to go play against the Commanders, on defense or something like that. We may have been looking at a different outcome. So, all the goodwill that we got in the regular season got washed away with just the taste that I don't think we can get out of our mouths anytime soon. I'm ready to turn the chapter on this. We have a lot of coaching stuff kind of looking through. It will be a little bit of like a refresh with this team heading into next year, even if a lot of the players are the same, just with the vibe that we're going to be getting from the coaches. But I'll stay true on this. In Dan and Brad, we trust, and I still and Trilo, and I still love the direction this team is headed in. But let's not take another step back next year. We got to improve on everything, and let's hope that starts with a healthier roster.
And that, my friends, is the word of Phil Byrne. And we'll call it quits on that note here. Thanks for joining us on this episode of Kneecaps for Breakfast. We are putting a bow on the 2024 season. We look ahead to the off season, so Phil and I will be starting to have some fun starting next week with our next episode. Stay with us here on Kneecaps for Breakfast. For Phil Byrne across the way, Vince Progar saying good morning, go Lions, forward down the field, over and out.